Hi Algebra 1, welcome to your first video that goes with your workbook this year. And as you notice, I'm going to try something a little bit different. I'm going to set up on the screen the whole lesson that we're going to be working through so you can see here's part 1, here's part 2, and here's part 3. So you kind of get a whole overview, and then we will zoom in on each part and work through it. So here we go. In your first activity, you're doing a notice and wonder. This is looking at the battery life of 26 cell phones, but before you do anything, I want you to label. We have a dot plot, a histogram, and a box plot. Once you do that, answer the questions, what do you notice and what do you wonder? Start again when you're ready. A couple things that I want you to make note of here, if you didn't notice already. In the dot plot, each dot is representing one cell phone, and that dot is showing how long that battery lasted. For example, this dot right here would show that that cell phone battery lasted 5.5 hours. In the histogram, now we're grouping things together. So this bar right here would be saying that we have 2 cell phones that had a battery life between 2 and 3 hours. And the box plot looks a lot different than the other two, but it's really showing our minimum and our maximum, and then there's other stuff going on in the middle there that we're going to talk about as we go. All right, in the rest of the lesson, we're going to focus on histograms and box plots. Dot plots are pretty simple, so we're going to focus on the other two. So here we have a bunch of data about the days it takes for different tomato plants to produce tomatoes. First thing we need to do is fill out the frequency table right here. So we're going to use this data to fill out that frequency table. So we have one piece of data that is between 40 and 50 days to produce fruit. Then we have 4 pieces of data that are between 50 and 60 days to produce fruit. And then we have to decide, what do we do with 60? Well, if your number falls right on your boundary, it does go to the bigger category. So that 60 is going to be included in our 60 to 70. So if you want to think of this as like 50 to 59, and then 60 to 70, or 60 to 69, so on and so forth, that's perfectly fine. So this is what your frequency table should end up looking like. Let's go make a histogram. A histogram does end up looking like a bar graph, but the important thing is that the bars are connected. And that's because we're looking at a continuation of all of our data on the bottom. So first category, 40 to 50, there's one piece of data in there, so I go up to 1. 50 to 60 or 50 to 59, I go up to 4. Here's what your completed histogram looks like. And remember, the numbers that you went up to on the side here should match those numbers in your frequency table. And we want to start to see patterns. And we notice that most of our tomatoes ripened between 60 and 80 days. We are not going to do number 3 together in the video, but if you do complete on your own, make sure you just get an extra stamp for that in class. Now we're going to use the same data about our tomato plants and create a box plot. In number 1, the first thing you're going to do is find the median. Make note that that is the middle data point. Our data down here, there's 30 data points, and they are listed in order, which is very helpful here. Because it's an even number, you don't have just one middle number. You're going to have these 2 numbers that are in the middle, the 15th and the 16th terms. And so when that happens, you actually find the average or the mean of those 2 numbers. So that's going to be 71 as our median. I'm also just going to draw a line right here to split our data in half. In number 2, it says that we're going to find the median of the least 15 values. So that means the first half of the data. The median of the first half, there's 15 pieces of data in that first half, so the middle is going to be the 8th term, so that's going to be 61, or 62, excuse me, and we call that quartile 1, or the first quartile. Make note of that. Then go on and find the value for number 3. The median of the second half of data would be 78. So that goes there for quartile 3, or the 3rd quartile. To complete the table, the minimum and maximum is pretty easy. 47 for the minimum, 90 for the maximum. Now number 4 says that we're going to use the 5-number summary. That's this. There's 5 numbers there summarizing your data. We're going to use that to make our box plot. So we start with a line at 47, and then a line at our maximum 90, And then we also put in lines for the quartile 1, the median, and the quartile 3. So 62, 71, and 78. And then what we do is we make our box with the middle 3 numbers, and then we make the whiskers, or those lines, out to our maximum and our minimum. We're going to talk more coming up about what that box plot means. Let me zoom in on it a little bit. Essentially, the box plot helps us to see how variable or how spread out our data is. So for example, if we had a really long box plot, it would mean that our data was really spread out. If our box plot was really short, it would mean that our data was really squished together. I am now in the lesson summary part of your book, so please be there. There's some important stuff in this lesson summary that we just need to talk about. First, with the dot plot, you see this dot plot here. Again, we didn't talk about that too much because they're assuming you've done that in previous grades, and it's not that difficult. Remember that each dot represents one piece of data, and when they're stacked up like this, it helps us see that, oh, there were a lot that were, in this case, listed for 7 minutes. So it helps us see the shape and the distribution of the data. We're going to talk more about distribution coming up. Next, we had a histogram, and we created a histogram in the lesson. Again, each interval includes the number at the lower end of the interval, but not the upper end. Underline that in your book. What that means is that if you have, say, 5 minutes, someone paid attention for 5 minutes in this case, they would be included in this bar, in the 5 to 10. If someone had exactly 10 minutes of focus time, they would be included in the bar bigger than them. So also the histogram can still show the shape of the distribution. We'll talk about that again coming up, but it's going to be a term that you hear. Then lastly, we looked at a box plot. And for the box plot, we need the 5-number summary, which is what we created with our minimum, quartile 1, median, quartile 3, and maximum. And the box plot is good for showing how variable or how spread out the data is. All right, guys, so that was your first lesson. Make sure that you're asking questions as you go. Make sure you rewind and rewatch the video if you need, and make sure you're taking notes in your book. That's going to be your resource as you work through the unit. All right, take care.